Namaskar and a warm welcome to today's session on Meaning and Scope of Tribal Studies. In India, tribes, officially called the scheduled tribes, they are indigenous communities that have historically lived in remote areas, in forests, in hills, and in geographically isolated regions, and have distinct cultures, languages, and traditions. There are around 705 ethnic communities called scheduled tribes in India. In order to understand tribal diversity, to examine their issues and challenges, to promote cultural sensitivity and respect, and to facilitate inclusive development, the School of Extension and Development Studies had launched a postgraduate diploma in tribal studies very recently. And we are fortunate to have with us the coordinator of this program, Professor Grace Don Nameching. Welcome, Professor Grace.
Thank you.
And without wasting much time, let us delve deeper into today's topic. Dr. Grace, can you briefly introduce the tribes and their features, especially with respect to the country, India?
Professor Nisha, when we talk about tribes, you had introduced tribes in India wherein there are more than 700 tribes, and India has the largest population of tribes in the world, and they are so huge that they constitute what is called around 8.6% of the population in India. And when we are talking about the population of tribe, it would number around 104, more than 104 million, which is really a huge population when we compare to the other tribes in other parts of the world. So they have, the tribes in India, they have the largest population in India, the tribes. And when we are talking about the tribes, we are talking about tribes in terms of what is the sex ratio. This is how I would introduce the tribes in India. The sex ratio would be around 990 per thousand, which is 990 females per 1,000 males, which is higher than the sex ratio of the population of India. The sex ratio, in fact, is 943 per thousand males. This is the sex ratio of India. So you have the tribal population having a much higher sex ratio compared to the national average. However, the literacy rate of the tribals in India is at 59%, which is much lower than the national average of slightly above 74%, according to the 2011 census. When we are talking about tribes, Professor Nisha, tribes, like you introduced in the beginning, they have some unique traits and characteristics. These would be characteristic like they live in a specific geographical area, and this geographical area would be a difficult terrain. It would be not that accessible. Then you have tribes who have this great sense of identity, uniqueness. They would use a specific language or dialect. Then they would be more or less politically autonomous, and also tribes would also be more or less self-sufficient in terms of the food that they eat. They would grow it themselves, or they would also go for hunting and gathering, or agriculture, or fishing, and so on and so forth. So they are quite self-sufficient, and also they have a very unique cultural practices which varies from tribe to tribe. We have the Bhil tribes, which has the largest population in India, and they number around 4.6 million, which is around 46 lakh. And the smallest tribe would be Andamis tribe who do not even number 20. So we have this variation of population in terms of tribes from region to region. Then we have in terms of sex ratio wherein the tribal population has above the national average, but however, literacy would be much lower than the national average.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Grace, for pointing out these prominent features, especially the higher sex ratio as compared to the national average, is a very eye-catching figure.
Right.
Showing that somewhere embedded in the tribal culture is women empowerment.
Right.
Now, moving further, could you tell us the scope of tribal studies? SOEDS had recently launched this very important, a very timely intervention from the School of Extension and Development Studies in terms of developing and launching this program, and you are coordinating this program. Could you elaborate on what is the scope of this program?
When we are talking about the scope of tribal studies, the study of tribes has evolved significantly since its beginnings with colonial motivation. Today, tribal studies are pursued not only for academic purposes but also with political implication. When we are talking about tribal study, it includes basically two main aspects: the study of individual tribes and cross-cultural studies. When we are talking about individual tribes, we are talking about studying comprehensively with a focus on specific cultural phenomenon. And in cross-cultural studies, two or more tribes either compared in their entirety or examined concerning particular cultural aspects. So when we are talking about the scope of tribal studies, it could be studying individual tribes as a whole or studying certain aspects of that tribe. It could be cultural, it could be economic, it could be religious, it could be social. And when we are talking about cultural studies, we are going to study or compare two or more tribes as a whole, or taking certain aspects to study those two tribes. And Professor Nisha, when we are talking about scope of tribal studies, with regard to careers, with regard to what you can do if you take up tribal studies, there are a lot of options in terms of you can work in NGOs, you can work in projects which takes up projects with regard to tribal welfare schemes. You can also be a part of the CSR, in companies wherein they would also focus on the tribal population, and also with regard to being a welfare officer in tribal areas, and you could also teach, and so many other ways by which tribal studies, if you are interested, there are a lot of scope with regard to tribal studies.
Now, could you tell us what are the principles of tribal studies?
The principles of tribal studies includes a multidisciplinary approach, integrating insights from anthropology, sociology, political science, and cultural studies. So when we are talking about principles, we are also talking about the key approach. Let me discuss briefly historical methods. When we are talking about historical methods, we are talking about studying tribal communities in which involves examining a range of sources to understand their past and cultural evolution. And when in historical methods, or when researchers study through historical methods, they utilize what is called archival documents, oral histories, colonial records, and ethnographic accounts to reconstruct the historical context of tribal societies. This approach helps to trace the impact of external influences such as colonization and state policies on tribal life. When we are talking about political approach, we are talking about political representation of Indian tribes, because it is very crucial for the tribes to be politically represented. for their voice to be heard, to be part of the decision making process, to be part of the governance. So we have the government with their affirmative action. A government would reserve seats for the scheduled tribes wherein they can, contest elections, and when they are voted to power, they can take part in the decision making process, they can be part of the governing process. And when we are talking about the political approach, we are talking about how important it is for the government or the agencies or the people who are involved in uplifting the tribals to implement welfare schemes, continuously make an effort to enhance representation and empower tribal communities. This is very important, Professor Nisha, because in the beginning of the session, when we were you and me were introducing tribal studies, we talked about how the literacy rate is at 59%. So when we are talking about political representation, it will go a long way in helping the tribals to for their voices to be heard, to be part of the decision making process, and also to be part of implementing various policies, programs for the tribals. Then we will talk about fieldwork tradition in tribal studies. Fieldwork tradition in tribal studies is a cornerstone of the discipline. It emphasizes immersive first-hand research within the community being studied. Anthropologists often live for extended periods among the people they are researching, engaging in participant observation to gain deep insights into their daily lives, customs, and social structures. This method involves building trust and rapport with community members, conducting interviews, and participating in local activities. So, when we are talking about fieldwork tradition is a very important aspect of tribal studies, because the researcher who is studying the tribal communities or the tribe would go and live among the tribal people, and for him or for her, the person who is conducting the research, he or she will be able to collect rich data, qualitative data, and also develop a nuanced understanding of the tribal way of life, their perspective. And also, when we are talking about fieldwork tradition, when the researcher who is studying the tribal society or the tribal life, and he or she is living among them, the person is able to understand the complexities of human life. So fieldwork tradition is a very important approach to tribal studies. And the way the person does research when he is doing fieldwork is very different from other research, because fieldwork is where minutely you are able to observe people in their day-to-day life. So this is another approach, and there's another approach which is called economic approach. When we are talking about economic approach, we are talking about livelihood, we are talking about subsistence, we are talking about the means by which individuals and communities secure the resources necessary for survival and well-being. This include various economic activities such as agriculture, fishing, hunting, and wage labor. Subsistence practices often rely on traditional knowledge and sustainable use of local resources. And also, when we are talking about the economic approach, when we are also talking about livelihoods, we are talking about in the tribal societies, livelihoods are closely tied to cultural and social practices. So these are some of the principles, some of the approach of tribal studies.
Thank you, Dr. Grace, for elaborating upon the different approaches to tribal studies. You clearly mentioned about the various ways in which this tribal studies can be approached, starting from historical approach to political approach to field work, and then finally you talked about the economic approach. So in each of these approach, I understand that the different aspects of
Right.
the tribes are studied. Now, having discussed about the various approaches of tribal studies, could you now let our audience know what is the importance of tribal studies? Why is it important that we have a discipline of tribal studies?
When we talk about tribal studies, it is very important to know the importance of why tribal studies has been launched by our School of Extension Development Studies. Like you said in the beginning, we have launched PG diploma in tribal studies, and we felt that this particular program will make learners, will make people who are enrolled in this program about the issues, the challenges, the importance, the meaning and scope of tribal studies. They would also be able to learn about the contributions of a lot of freedom fighters who have been part of our independence, our struggle for independence. So, this particular program gives a lot of insight into the very aspect of the very nuances of why tribal studies have been launched and why it is so important. Now, talking about the importance of tribal studies are viewed as knowledge societies, sources of new ideas and innovations. Their art and craft are in high demand in urban areas, especially, and their knowledge of local herbs and medicines is valued by modern biomedicine practitioners. Their ecological relationship and lifestyles are often cited as models of sustainable living. They incorporate tribal ethos and values. And when we are talking about incorporating tribal ethos and values, it is very important because it is seen as essential to many contemporary non tribal societal problems. When we are talking about the knowledge that people from tribal societies have, we are talking about their knowledge about medicinal plants. We are talking about how they know methods of how to dry or preserve plants, vegetables, so that they can be kept for a long time. And so and also how a tribal society would be having knowledge about so many flora and fauna. They would know about animal behaviors, and also they would have this enthusiastic way of talking about their oral traditions. They would have so much knowledge about art and craft, the way handicrafts are in great demand, how much they are so talented in terms of weaving, in terms of making handicrafts, art, craft, and so on and so forth. So it is very important that people who have no knowledge, or people who have little knowledge, can enhance about tribals by taking up this particular program. And also, when we are talking about tribal studies have a holistic, in other words, it provides a holistic understanding of social phenomenon, contrasting with the atomistic, fragmenting understanding often fostered by Western knowledge system. And when we are talking about tribal societies, when we are talking about knowledge society, the knowledge that tribal society has, we are talking about how the social phenomenon which are in tribal societies are not segregated or isolated. For example, when we are talking about tribals selecting a plot of land to cultivate, rituals are performed before they cultivate the land, and also how economic activities are closely related to religious aspect, how they are tied to religious life. When we are talking about the importance of tribal society, it is very important to see how much importance they have placed to preserving their natural habitat. We see that they have a high respect for nature, and also a lot of them have what is called an understanding about the weather phenomenon. They have this holistic approach to the nature. So, Professor Nisha, when we are talking about tribal societies, it is very important to note their contribution. It is very important to note how tribal ethos and values are integrated. It is very important to note that they are a very significant part of our life, wherein they have new innovative ideas. They have so much knowledge about medicinal plants, and also, each tribal community, each tribe in India, like in the beginning when we talked about how the tribal population is huge. It has the largest population in the world. We are talking about more than 700 tribal communities in India. They have such unique traditions, they have such unique cultural practices, they have such unique identity, a sense of belonging, and also such, a solid unity that we people from non-tribal communities should be able to incorporate all these ethos. I personally belong to a tribal community, so I know the significance, I know the scope, the importance of tribal societies. And when I talk about non-tribal communities, it is very important that the very ethos of tribal values, their understanding of so many knowledge about nature, they should also appreciate them.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Grace, for so nicely elaborating upon the importance of tribal studies. You rightly said that the tribal population is the closest to nature as anyone can be, and any
Right.
community can be. And they are very distinct in their culture, very distinct in their knowledge.
Right.
They have so much of indigenous knowledge, so much of it is still undocumented,
Right.
and it is so beneficial. So much of they have so much of knowledge, such vast knowledge in terms of ethnomedicine.
Right.
And as you said, they have their own ways of predicting the weather.
Right.
And many a times our modern weather systems may fail, but they may
Right.
still
True,
succeed.
true. Right.
And so much of them is still undocumented, so much of them is still unknown. And I am so glad that you came up with this program of postgraduate diploma in tribal studies. And I would encourage our viewers, our listeners, to enroll for this program, which is a very rich program. It takes you to the it takes you through a journey of knowing the tribes of different parts of India. It has covered almost entire country from
Right.
north, south, east, west, and center. And I would really encourage all our viewers to participate, to to enroll for this program, and it will definitely nourish you and nurture you in your knowledge about the tribal communities of India. And with this note, we will take your leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.